Hi, I'm Paul from Trending Who, What, Where, and When. Today I'll be speaking with the multiple award-winning author Paul C. Thornton about his book, The Joy of Cruising. Paul will be joining us from Fort Myers, Florida. Trending WWW is a luxury travel guide. I'd start by asking you where you take your friends when they come to visit you, what local areas you would take them to.
Well, I live in Fort Myers, Florida. That's on the Gulf, on the west coast of Florida. We're about 35 minutes from Naples. Many folks have heard of Naples. Um, Per capita, it's the wealthiest area in the country, actually. Um, there's more retired CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs retire in Naples than anywhere in the country. So I say that only because one of the places that I take friends and family who come to visit is we drive down to Naples and we tour some of those gorgeous mansions. And you can actually take a boat ride, which will take you to the side of the mansions that you don't see from because they're facing the water. So there's this area is just surrounded by water. So there's just so many places I can take guests. Sanibel Island. Many of your audience will have heard of Sanibel Island, and so we go out to Sanibel, or we'll take people out to Sanibel and have lunch or something like that. Fort Myers Beach, we're 10 minutes away from Fort Myers Beach, also a very, very major U.S. vacation spot. So it's just, I just take people to places they're not used to seeing because, I'm originally from up north, the New York City area and then Delaware. And so, you just don't get the water views that you get down here.
You were born in New York City. Then you had time in Delaware where you went to school at two different times.
Yeah, so I went to school after I grew up in New York. Left to go to the Army, and then I went to school right out of the Army. Actually, I started while I was in the Army. I got my bachelor's degree, and then immediately after the Army, I pursued my master's of business administration at the University of Rochester, and then I went to work in Delaware for DuPont, which at the time was, that was synonymous with Delaware. It was a major multinational company. And I worked for them for 17 years. And then I went back to school
Right.
at the University of Delaware. And by that time, I had made the transition to higher ed. And so I went back to school and got my doctorate in education.
That's a transition because it looked like for a long period you were a Fortune 500 executive, and then you went back to school and changed fields.
Yeah. For 17 years, I was a Fortune. Actually, at the time we were Fortune 10.
Oh, okay.
We were the 10th largest company in the country, and I worked for them for 17 years. And towards the end of my tenure there, I started teaching at night. Business classes at night, just to supplement, my income, and I loved it. I loved teaching, and so I transitioned from the corporate business to teaching. Now, I had transitioned to small business. I own a chain of small businesses. You remember video stores, right?
I'm that old, yes.
Yeah, some people look at me like, what is he talking about, video stores? But anyway, I had a chain of videos. So I was in video for 23 years. So, once I left DuPont to operate the video stores full time, when you're leaving a big company with a lot of security and benefits, you have to do things to supplement your income. And so I started teaching to supplement my income.
So then I would ask, you to tell us about how your writing career began and how it evolved into your being published.
The day my writing career began, when I woke up, I was not planning to write a book. And when I went to bed, I had already started writing a book. So the way that happened was only a few years ago, 58 at the time. And my daughter was getting married. And I had to, you know, as the tradition goes, the father of the bride had to give like a reception address. And I said to my daughter, what am I going to talk about? You know, which I wasn't really excited about doing this. And she said, talk about memories of her growing up. And so I couldn't very well talk about memories of her growing up without talking about the most powerful memory that I had of her growing up. And that powerful memory was when she was 6 years old. I had had a major trauma when she was 6 years old. I was 29, and I had a sudden illness. I had a brain tumor. And so I had an operation, major operation, 12 hours long. And you know, the road to recovery was difficult, including, you know, I didn't walk very well. And so at 6 years old, my daughter every day would hold my hand, and I'd have a cane in one hand and her hand in my other, and she would walk me around the neighborhood, helping me to get my gait back, helping me recover. And so that's a very, very powerful memory. And so I felt like I had to say that in my wedding talk, but I couldn't just drop that without providing some context. And so I provided some context in my wedding talk, and I said things that no one in the audience knew. Some things not even my mom knew. You know, for instance, in my operation, I lost hearing on one side. In my operation, I lost sight on one side. I lost I have paralysis on one side of my face. So I said all of these things in my talk. And like my mom never knew that I had no sight on one side, for instance. And most of the people, even the ones who knew about my surgery, most didn't know that I couldn't hear on one side. And so it was sort of like a coming out. And the more I spoke, the better I felt. And so at the end of the talk, I said, you know, I have to retain this feeling of, it was liberating. It was freedom I felt. And so when I got back to my hotel room that night, I started writing a memoir because it felt good talking about things. And so I continued to write about what I was talking about. And so that's how my first book became a reality. So I didn't mean to get into that long story.
Well, I think that your first book,
that's how it came about.
It sounds really interesting. I read the part that you went to the dentist, and the dentist gave you some news, and then you went from there, and just how it unfolded. What an incredible story.
Oh, did you read the book, or did I take it out?
Not yet, but I intend to.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, the dentist is a very big part of the book, and I didn't know how you knew that.
Well, I did quite a bit of research looking at what your books were, and what a story.
Okay. Yeah. It was caught. My illness was caught totally by. I had no pain, no symptoms. You know, if I didn't have a 6-month checkup with the dentist, it might not ever have been discovered. And they say what happens with the kind of what I had, you know, you just go to sleep and you don't wake up. You know, it wasn't something like you feel a lot of symptoms.
Okay, and you were young at that time.
I was 29.
Yeah. Anyway, that would be one interesting book.
Yeah, so that's how that book came about. The book has a very provocative title. It's called White Man's Disease. It has absolutely nothing to do with race. But there is a reason why it's called white man's disease. It's almost like an inside joke. You have to read the book to get it. But yeah, that was the book. It was very well received. I'm not saying commercially. I didn't sell a zillion copies. Independent authors don't sell very many books, but it was well received and turned critically. I won a fairly major award for independent writing. I won several awards, but there was one I'm particularly proud of because, you know, it was judged. There was a monetary award, and, you know, it wasn't like I was honorable mention or finalist. I was literally the winner, the grand prize winner.
Oh.
So I was proud of that book, but more proud of the fact that, as I said, I was essentially living a lie, and the book, you know, was coming out. So now I don't, you know, I would never have told you 5 years ago, before the book came out, that I'm deaf in one ear. I was too embarrassed. I never would have told you that I don't have sight on one side. I was too embarrassed. I was very self-conscious. And so I lived 30 years hiding things. Wow. And so now I'm like, I'm myself. I'm liberated.
You're free. Okay. You're free of that burden. What inspired you to write The Joy of Cruising, which would be a totally different book from your first book?
One of the things, I definitely enjoyed the process of writing. And so, you know, once I wrote my book, you know, like I said, I never fancied myself as a writer. So once I wrote that book, you know, it's not like, okay, it's time to work on the next book. But I did miss writing a book. I loved it. And you know, so I wouldn't have been surprised if something came along that made me write, and sure enough, it did. I like cruising. I'm not a huge cruiser. I cruise, you know, once or twice, a couple of times a year. Every year I take my grandkids on a cruise because that's, you know, that's a great way to bond with them, and they live far away, and so I bring them down to Florida for the summer, and we do an end of summer cruise before I take them back home. And so in the process of, so, you know, obviously if you're going on a cruise, that's spending a fair amount of money. You do, you know, I like to research do consumer research. And what I found was when I was doing research on cruising, you know, I would learn a lot about the cruise ships to choose from and things like that. But I was finding that cruises as a category was a culture that just seemed very, very passionate and interesting. And I started getting intrigued by individual cruisers. For instance, I was on one forum, Cruise Critic, which is probably the most popular online internet forum about cruising. And, you know, someone started a discussion about how much do you cruise in a year? And so I was just reading some of the responses, and it was blowing me away. I mean, people were cruising, you know, for me, a big deal was cruising twice a year. There were people who were cruising 4 and 5 and 10 and 15 times in a single year. And so eventually I decided that there are enough interesting people and interesting stories that there might be a book out of this. And so that's how the book was developed.
And you took the book and you put it into what, 33 different chapters?
Yes, it's 33 different, it's features of interesting, fascinating cruisers. And so there's 33 of them in the book. For instance, I had one chapter called Cuba Cruising. So in that chapter, I took 3 different couples and who didn't know each other. They're very diverse from different parts of the world. And I did a piece on Cuba from their eyes. Each couple had gone to Cuba. And so I did a feature on each couple. So that would have been one chapter, but there were 3 features within that chapter. So it's 33 fascinating personalities. And some of these personalities were people who, if you go right now, you can Google them and all kind of stuff will come up. And others are people that, you know, no one's ever heard of, but they had a story that I felt people would want to read about. A good case in point. I found this gentleman. I was on a Facebook cruise group, and I was reading one day, and this person said, I just got back. It was middle of 2018, and he posted, I just got back from my 11th cruise of 2018. Only 10 more to go. Okay, it's the middle of 18. He just got back from his 11th cruise of the year, and only 10 more to go in 18. So he got an unbelievable amount of responses. A lot of wise guy responses like, hey buddy, buy a boat, get a life, that kind of thing. But then a lot of responses of, you know, like you're blessed and this is wonderful and are you rich? And well, I reached out to the guy. I sent him a private message and I said, you know, I'm writing a book about interesting cruises and I sure would like to talk to you. And he got back to me. He was from Australia and he got back to me, and make a long story short, he's one of the people in the book. So some of the people are just, I call them ordinary cruisers with extraordinary stories. And then others are famous, you know, one of the people in the book has won a Grammy.
Okay. That would be on the music cruises.
Actually, he's actually not even in the section on the music cruise. He's in the section. Well, yeah, he's a musician. He's called the resident jazz ambassador for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines.
Okay.
So it was really a story about him. It wasn't even in the section on music cruises because he goes on just he performs on regular cruises for them, but in their jazz club. But when in his you know, he's 70 years old now. In his 20s, and you might remember, I don't know if you ever liked rock music. You remember Billy Preston?
I do.
He was Billy Preston's drummer. And so that's how he won a Grammy. Billy Preston's group won the Grammy.
Okay.
And he won the Grammy as being Billy Preston's drummer. So, you know, that was rock funk music way back when. Now he's, you know, his natural music is jazz. So he's now playing jazz. So yeah, it was just stories about people who had a story to tell. And so it was so much fun to write that first book, and it was well received, and it did sell, you know, as independent books go, it sold reasonably well. And so I made a decision in the fall or late summer of 19 to write a follow-up. So that book was called The Joy of Cruising, and then the follow-up was simply going to be called More Joy of Cruising. And so I had gotten about halfway done, had conducted a lot of it was going to be the same format, nonfiction, you know, based on profiles of individuals. And I had, you know, done a lot of interviews. I had hours and hours of tape that had to be transcribed. And then the pandemic happened. And you know, that book was set aside. And you know, eventually I started back writing again, but the title of the book changed from More Joy of Cruising to Cruising Interrupted.
In fact, on the Joy of Cruising, I thought it was interesting how you made different categories, like cruise bloggers or theme cruising or performing on the ocean. And then you had different people inside the categories.
Right. And I will have in the new book, I do the same thing with categories or with sections.
Okay.
Although the first section of the new book is called the title of the book, which is Cruising Interrupted, because the first section gives a few real life stories of people who were cruising, who were actually on the ocean at the time we went into this global lockdown. And so in some cases it was pretty uneventful, but in other cases it was pretty crazy. At least one person who's in the book, she got COVID on a cruise ship. Her feature's called "I Got COVID on a Cruise, Can't Wait to Cruise Again." Yeah, her name is Chris, the one who got COVID. I actually have about 3 different couples who were trapped on the high seas when the shutdown happened. So I have one person, she was on a cruise ship, and it would just go from country to country. They couldn't dock anywhere because no one would let them in. So anyway, the first section of the book is sort of some real life COVID related stuff. Then I have a section called the Globetrotters. These are people who do an unbelievable amount of travel. They're big. They actually transcend, more than just cruising. They actually are known in the travel world, but they do a lot of cruising. I do have another section on bloggers. Once again, I have sections, not as many as the first book, but I do have sections.
Actually, I think I saw that you have Scott Eddy as one of your interviews.
Yes, he is in the section called the Globetrotters, and he's the first feature in that section because it sounds like you know who he is. He just premiered a TV show called Video Globetrotter. So yeah, his chapter is done, or his feature is done. As a matter of fact, if you go to my website, there is an excerpt of his chapter on the website, because that's what I do. That's what I'm starting to do, is put some excerpts, build some, try to build a little bit of anticipation for the new book, which should come out in December.
I can see that you do a lot on Twitter, though.
Well, I'm trying to promote books, and so I have to strike a balance on Twitter between, engaging with other writers and just marketing my books. But, as an independent author, that's what you have to do, is you got to market like crazy.
So then I've noticed that when I asked you about the awards, you've won quite a few awards. You won the Independent Author Network Finalist Book of the Year.
Yeah, so you're talking about for the Joy of Cruising or the I've won awards for both, but yes, Independent Author Network, I won for Joy of Cruising. Then there was one called the Florida Authors and Publishers Association President's Award, and I won a bronze medal for that. So yeah, I've won some awards for both books.
Yeah, also, it looks like you won in 2019 the New Apple Summer ebook awards for excellence in independent publishing.
Yes. I won that one. I won that for Joy of Cruising. I also won that same award for White Man's Disease too.
I had a couple of questions about things I saw on your Facebook. I wanted to ask you about the Bionic Bar.
Okay.
It was referenced in your book, but when I saw the video, they make only one drink, or do they make all different drinks?
No, they make anything you want, including, so you can order anything that you would order at a bar, but then you can just make up drinks. And they'll mix up anything that so if you say, I want a shot of bourbon and a shot of hot sauce and a shot of grenadine, it'll mix you up that drink. So yeah, you put in you complete your entry, your order on like an iPad.
Okay.
And so it tells the robots, the bionic arm, what to mix. So yeah, you can get anything you want, including non-alcoholic drinks, because a lot of kids are fascinated.
Okay, I thought that was incredible. I've never seen anything like that before. How it just was taking all the different, picking up the parts and putting them in the glass, and then it looked like it put the glass in some little box or something for a few minutes and brought it back out.
Yeah, it puts the glass on like a track. and the
Okay.
track slides the glass towards the customer.
You had another video on your Facebook. It showed high above the Anthem of the sea. It's not a drone video. And I was going to ask you what that was.
So Anthem has an attraction. It's like an arm that takes like a glass capsule.
Okay.
So you get in the capsule, and the arm lifts that capsule high above the ship, and it's just something you have a great view.
It definitely looked like, I thought maybe you were in a helicopter or something, because it looked like you were way up in the air.
Well, it's really just an attraction that they have on a Royal Caribbean. You know, my daughter was scared of heights, so I had to hold her hand the whole time we were going up. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And sounds like your next book will be finished in December.
My goal is to wrap it up by the end of the month. I don't think I'm going to make it, as it turns out, but that's my goal.
Okay.
And then by the time they do all they have to do in terms of preparing it for publication and printing and all of that, it's gonna take a couple of months. So my goal is for people to be able to buy it, in gift giving season.
Well, seeing as you're selling it as ebooks also, it should give you more time for the season, because they can buy that right up to the last minute.
Amazon has this rule or requirement that you have to have a 1 month, what's called a pre-order period. So it might be available at Amazon on December 1st,
Okay.
but it won't show up at your house until like the first week in January.
Well, then I guess I'll also ask you if you'd share any advice that you'd have for new writers, share your experience and expertise with them, because it seems like it's difficult to get started in writing.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to new writers is first of all, the first thing I would say, I don't know that I would say this to them. I would answer a question if they ask me, because I don't want to rain on their parade. But I don't think most new writers realize how the financial model works with publishing a book. First of all, the chances of a publishing company picking you up, you might as well go buy a lottery ticket, because unless you're famous, unless your name is, Barack Obama or Oprah Winfrey or something like that, they're not going to knock on your door, tear down your door to get you to write a book for them. Now, there are some, you can submit books to publishers, but again, the chances of, it's sort of like new parents who send pictures of their babies to Gerber and say, this would be a perfect person for your commercials. The chances of that happening are slim and none, unless your cousin is the CEO of Gerber or something like that. So, and I'm being a little silly, but so I would just let writers know that it's very, very unlikely that they will be picked up by one of the publishing companies. And so they need to understand how self-publishing works if they just want to get their book out there. Now, if they have their mind set on getting picked up from a publishing company, there's nothing I can tell them about self-publishing. But if they just want to get their book published, self-publishing is a route that they can go. And then they need to understand that of people who self-publish, the ones who make money are a tiny, tiny percentage.
Okay.
I mean, a tiny percentage. So I just think that new writers need to come at writing realistically. If you're writing to make money, that's the wrong reason. That's the one thing. And then the other thing, just in terms of writing advice, I would say to a new writer, make sure that you are passionate about your subject matter. And because if you're passionate about your subject matter, you're going to get your best work out, and nothing's going to stop you. People talk about all the time, how do you find time to write? Well, if you're passionate about your subject, you're going to find time to write. You're going to make time to write. But somebody who writes a book about something that they're not passionate about, I don't know. To me, that's a lot like going to a 9-to-5 job. I mean, that's I don't know if that made sense, but that's my biggest advice is find something you're passionate about. My 3 books, it was very easy for me to write the 3 books because I was passionate about all 3 subjects. The first book, it I mean, this sounds dramatic, overly dramatic, but I sometimes like to say it saved my life. And so I was driven, I was passionate. But even the second book, even though it had nothing to do with the first book, I was very passionate about it. Because I'm passionate about cruising and what have you. So just got to find something that you're passionate about, and you will do whatever it needs, whatever it takes to make that a reality.
Actually, I also noticed on the Joy of Cruising, I think your research was extremely good. You found all different niches and all different people, even some that we ourselves knew. I was really impressed that you must have put a lot of work into the research.
Yeah, and I'm one of those guys who I keep an iPad with me on every waking hour. And even when we drive, my wife drives, and so I get a chance to just bury myself in my iPad, and so I'm constantly that's what when you write nonfiction, you constantly have to research, because these people I interview a lot of times they say things, and I take it, you just can't take everything they say. It, their opinion is fine, or their experiences are fine, but if something is stated as a fact, you just can't, you just have to make sure that you do your research. So I had one person I interviewed, for instance, and I can't remember the locale, but the country was Uruguay. She said she kept referencing a certain place in Uruguay. And I'm glad I didn't just take that, because it turns out the place she was referencing is in Argentina.
Okay.
So on all of these folks, they tell me their stories and their anecdotes, but then I go back and I make sure that factually, I'm not just repeating what they say, because they may have a fact or two wrong.
I also noticed that in a lot of the stories you had interjected things into the story. You'd say, have a comment or say something positive or interesting to complement what they were saying.
Yeah. I was trying. I'm trying not to make it just a clinical, just a non-fiction, just a facts man book.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't know if every time my stories are appreciated, like and I do the same thing in the current book. Many times out of the blue, because of something that the subject says or talks about, I'll interject something about my grandkids, just to humanize, the story, just to make it relatable. For instance, I just did a story about a vlogger. She's from UK, and I get photos from people and to put in the book. And so she had one photo of her and her significant other getting in a helicopter because they went on a tour above a volcano in Hawaii, and she said that they had them remove the doors. I guess that's an option. They had them remove the doors of the helicopter so they can feel the heat from the volcano. And so I wrote that in the book, but then I put in parentheses some corny comment like no thanks for me, please, or something like that. You know, I didn't have to put that in there. They weren't, you know, what the story's not about me, it was about them. But I just, you know, I just thought I'd throw that in. So I try to interject a little bit of myself in their stories. Because again, I don't want this to read just like a dry nonfiction.
Yeah. You achieved that. I think you did a good job with that. I also found you have like a 58-second video of yourself in that machine that's blowing you up in the air.
Right. And then you also, did you get the one that I sent of the guy, the instructor?
Actually, I did.
I had a lot of fun with that on one of my Facebook posts because I posted the one of me, and you know, I got some laughs and some attention. And then the next day, or a couple days later, I said, "Here is me after a day of practice," and it was the instructor, of course. I mean, if the cruise line's public relations departments would read the book, they would stock it in their gift shop because it's a great book. Public relations for cruising. There's a lot of publicity, all positive, on various cruise lines.
It would be a general promotion for the entire industry.